Hello and welcome back to our JRPG series. We've now got our characters attacking now to deal damage to each other. We're going to do that via a stats table. So just like any other good RPG, we have created a stats table and we're going to show how to implement these stats and their algorithms into the game, allowing us to deal damage to our actors. So join us straight away and get started. Okay, so to get things started, I've already created a comma separated values spreadsheet, and I've included this in part of the zip file that is the starter content for this project. So if you want to use the same stat sheet, you're more than welcome to, but by all means make your own for your own games. Essentially though, you need to make a table up of all the various stats that will be available for the player at various levels. Now this is just the base stats. These will be changed per character as well. More on that in a moment. But first of all, we need to get this inside the game. So what we're going to do is first of all create a data structure. So go to blueprints, structure, and we're going to call this one stat table struct. And inside there, we need to make each of the columns available in here. So you look at the comma separated value sheet, and for each column except for the first one, which is going to be the row names, you want to put a struct entry for each one of these. Okay, so I'll put it over here, and this first one then is going to be HP, and this is going to be an integer, and I'll make a few more. The next one is going to be MP, then we got strength, STR, then we got stamina, accuracy, haste, and wisdom, and they have to be matching category names here as they are on the table. So with that done, we hit save and we'll close this, and then we want to make a data table. So go to miscellaneous data table and choose the stat table struct and click OK. I'm going to call this one the base stat table. And this will be the base stats for all characters inside of the game, not just player characters, but also enemies as well. So you're going to open this up, and you'll see on the data table details. If you don't see this tab, just go to window and you'll find it here, data table details. And in there, you'll see source file, no path set. So you want to use this, this file from your CSV. There's my CSV, and in it comes. If I go to my data table now and hit re-import, it will now come in with all those numbers. And you see the row name's been set here to be the level of the character. Okay, so we've got all the numbers in there now, which is great. And we're going to save this. We then want to go onto our combat component. And at the moment, we've got our stats separated into individual values in the unit stats here. So what we want to do is set up the starting base stats for these characters in here. So we're going to go to our begin play event on here, which is up here, and we're looking for the data table row. So get data table, and we get data table row. The data table is going to be our base stats. Now the row name is going to be the level of the character. So we all need a stat in here for their current level. So let's go to variables, and we'll call this one unit level, and we'll make that a integer. I'm going to drag that out and choose get, and then you're going to hook that into the row name. So first of all, you have to convert it over to a string. So to string, and then you can plug that into the row name. And this will give us our stats. So as I said, we've got them currently set up as individual ones. What I want to do is break this down and make it actually a structure instead. Now we've got one. So I'm going to take this out and we're going to promote that to a variable. I'm going to call this one base unit stats. And there we go. Now I don't need any of these ones now, so I'm going to put the base unit stats into unit stats category, and I can get rid of these ones. Now the one that at the moment we're using is haste. So we will need to replace haste being used. So I'm going to right click on this, find references, and you get the option down here. Click on this, and we're going to replace that with our base unit stats here. So we're going to go from here, break, and we just want to choose the haste stat. So I'm going to hide all connected pins and just tick on haste. And this is going to go into here. So now I can get rid of these values, these variables, because they shouldn't be used anywhere else. Okay, I'm going to put unit level also in the unit stats category. And we'll put action time as well in the stats and there. And we'll put its range character in there as well. So the way this is going to work is that each character will have the same base stat from this table. And then on top of that, they'll have modifiers, and the modifiers will change the stat that is being used based on the per character. So for example, you may have one character that's more magic heavy based, and you can make them modified to be more stronger in magic. And likewise, you can make their health higher, their MP higher, and so on and so forth. And this can also apply to enemies as well. So we're going to make another struct. And this is going to be very similar to the other one. So I'm just going to duplicate this. And we call this one stat modifier. And I'll make another folder for this as well to keep it tidy. So we call it stats, and we call it data. And we'll put the table in there and the two structs. Like so. Okay, so the stat modifier, all we have to do here is change all these from integers to floats. So float. And just go down the list, changing each and every one. Save, and we can close that. Okay, so back on the combat component, we're going to add that stat struct to here. So add new variable, and this will be the unit stat modifier. And we're going to use that stat modifier struct. And this will go into unit stats category. And the way this works is we want all of these to be default to 1. So we have to go back into our struct, and on each the default values, we're going to set the default value to 1. Meaning that per character, if we were to change this stat here to like in the wisdom here to like 1.2, it means there'll be 120% of their original base stat. And likewise, if we put like 0.8, it'll make them lower. So you can manipulate the stats like this per character. And so this is just one way of doing this. Every game in existence does this differently. This is just a way of doing it. Okay, so that is now set up there, and we can now customize that per character. We now want to be able to dictate how much damage they're going to do to their targets and how much damage they're going to receive from their targets. So with that now in place, we're going to set the default unit level here to 1. And now we have to hook up our HP that's on our character and MP that's on our character to the stats. Let's go to the unit based class. And on begin play, we want to calculate our HP current max and MP current max from their stats. So we're going to drag the combat component out. We're going to get their stats. So we get base stats. And we also want to get their stat modifier. And on here, we want to break each one of these. Like so. And we want to hide all the pins except for HP and MP, because that's all we're dealing with here. And again, that's it. Yep, cool. And on here, hide all these and keep HP and MP. And there you go. So what I'm going to do now is I want to multiply the HP here by a float, and that'll be by this HP value. And similarly for MP, by float by that MP value. And then we're going to set that to HP max and current. So set HP max to this, set HP current to this, set MP current and set MP max. Because on begin play they'll have the same health values. That may change if you're doing like a save system. You want to transfer their health between battles, but nonetheless, this is what you need to do, something like this. And this will go all on begin play. Okay, and compile that and save that. Okay, so now we've got the HP, we've got the MP, we've got the level, we've got all that stuff. So that. Next, we're going to go and click save. And then we'll go play the game. So if I hit play, you can see now the stats down here have changed to change the HP and MP on the bar here. So we've got 85 and 50 for each of the characters. Now, to show you the modifiers in action, if I go to each character and say Greystone here, because he's armored, will probably have more health, things like that. So I would go into his combat component and find the unit stats and look at the unit stat modifier. And I'll change maybe his HP here to be actually 1.2 instead. But his wisdom is lower. That'll be like probably like 0.9 and so forth. You can just set this all up per character. Now what else you can do later on maybe is if the player can unlock perks or skill points and things like that, you can make those skill points increase and change these stat modifiers per character so they can get stronger in one area than others, so you can dictate how your character grows. But nonetheless, something like this will set up. And another one we'll do an example for is Faye. We'll make her MP higher because she'd be more of a magic user maybe. And we'll go to the combat component and go down to her modifier stats. And we're going to set her MP here to be 1.4 and her wisdom to be 1.2. But her HP will do as 0.79. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want. Hit compile and save that. And we can test that now, and you should see their stats will be a bit different down here. Now at the moment you can see they're printing out as floats. Now what we actually want to do is make them ints and display as ints. So to get around that, you go back to your UI and in here, go to the widgets and go to the party widget slot. And we'll go into the graph of this. And on begin play, this is where we're setting up the various text fields here. So what I'm going to do is just bring this out here and separate it all out slightly, because on the two texts that are here, we're going to open these up and you want to turn down the maximum fractional digits from 3 to 0 and do it for each one. Okay, so now those decimals will be gone. Okay, there we have it. So there's the stat setup for the characters. Now let's get them dealing damage and calculating the damage. Okay, so we're going to go to the combat component and we're looking at when we want to apply damage to this thing. So on the unit stats here, we're going to add another variable to this. And this will be their base damage they will deal. So base physical damage, we'll call it. And make that a integer. And put that into the unit stats. And the base physical damage, this is going to be calculated based on a function we're going to make here. So I'm going to go new function. And we'll do calculate base damage. And on here, we're going to take out their base unit stats and their stat modifiers. And we're going to break each one of these. And for each one, we're going to hide all the pins, but we want to keep their strength value. So we go strength, and on here, we'll hide all these and keep strength. And we'll multiply these together. Multiplied by a float. Put that in there. So now we've got the modified damage value. we want then to take that value and multiply that again by 5. And this equation is something I've just sat down and worked out what would be good numbers. Sit down with whatever stats you're using and balance it out like that. This takes some time. It's just literally about trial and error, trying to get the numbers the way you want it. Do some research, see what other games have done. You can find some stuff out there. But we're just going to multiply this one by 5, and that will get us their new damage value. Now I want also to be some variance in between their attacks, so they don't hit the same value every single time. So I'm also going to multiply this by a small percentage. So I'm going to float, and we're going to go do a random float in range, and the random float is going to be between minus not minus, sorry, 0. Let's do 0.9 and 1.1. Okay, so there's a 10% either way difference in the amount of damage they do, and the calculate base damage is going to output that value. So return node, and we'll plug that into there, and we'll call this one calculated damage. Okay, so just realized we don't need that variable now, so we can get rid of that base physical damage. We don't need it, as we can just use this function instead. Okay, with that done, we can now go on to where we apply damage. Now the damage is being applied via our deal damage notifier. So we go into here, and when we're applying damage, we're getting the base damage from the calculate damage function. So go into this function, and you'll see base damage is being just set to 10. So now what I have to do, if I just drag in my calculate base damage function here and plug this in like so, we can feed that into it like there. Now one thing we can do here, and we will do later on, is we can change this base damage depending on what kind of thing we're damaging with. So is it going to be a magic spell? Is it going to be a physical attack? Is it going to be a ranged attack? We can do different calculations based on that. So we have the calculate damage that does one of 3 things, and we'll do those 3 things later on when we get round to them. But this will calculate. We can use this one function to calculate all 3 different types of damage. That'll go through there and hit compile, and that'll feed that into that. So next we want to actually take damage away from the character. So we're going to go to the character class, the unit base, and we're looking for when they deal damage, any damage, and we've got the montage for the hit react. What I'm going to do is put a sequence in here, plug that in, and put that into then 0. And on then 1, we're going to use the damage value coming out of this. Now, the damage value coming out of this is going to be affected by the stamina and durability of the character. So we need to calculate their damage resistance. So we're going to take a new function in our combat component, and go new function, and this will be calculate damage resistance. And likewise, this can be used for checking if it's going to be physical damage, magical damage, or ranged damage, or whatever you want to do. But for now, we'll just keep it simple. And in this one, the damage value is going to be the following. So we're going to take the damage amount, which is going to come through an input here. We'll call this one base damage. And that'll be a float. And we want to take this and we want to cube it. So we're going to do power and put net exponential to 3. And then we want to, not 3, sorry, to 2. Sorry, my bad. And we then want to divide that by the base damage plus the stamina of the character. So we get the stats, the stat modifier, and from there we'll break idle pins, keep stamina, idle pins, keep stamina, and multiply these together. And that's our new stamina value. and that will go into there. And then we're going to just plug that into the division here. And that's our final number. Again, this is also an equation that I've sat down and worked out just by trial and error, getting numbers that I kind of like the look of. It's a bit of a process, but stick with it, do some research, and you should be okay. But it's totally up to you on how the numbers look and appear in your game. It's just a matter of balancing, that's all. Okay, so hit compile and save there, and there is our stat for damage resistance. So now we've got a new damage coming out of this. So let's just change the name of this one to new damage, and hit compile, save. Right, so go back to the unit base, and we're going to take our combat component out, calculate damage resistance, and we'll plug that into then 1, and the base damage is going to come from our any damage event. So go here, and then new damage is what we're going to take away from the HP. So get HP, we're going to do minus float, drag the new damage into it, and then set it back to HP current. Actually, in fact, what you want to do is clamp it first. So clamp float between 0 and the HP max. Okay, and that sets up the HP current now. Hit compile and save that. So now let's get showing that on the actual UI. I'm going to go to the UI widget for the party widget and go to the graph. And on the construct for this, we've got construct already. No, so we're going to make a construct event. And on here, we want to take the unit we've looked at on this one, and from there, we're going to do bind event to take any damage. And when it does take any damage, we're going to tell it to do a custom event called refresh UI. And refresh UI is basically going to redo what you see here. So I'm just going to copy all the number stuff that you see here, and we're going to put it back here. And then hit compile. So now what this is going to do is basically tell this UI to look out for any time it takes damage and that damage event runs, and then it will recalculate what the new value should be. Hit save and close that. So now let's take a look at how this looks. And you can see the numbers appearing like so. If we look closely when they attack us, we should see their health change on Gideon there. And it went down from 85 to 75. It took 10 damage. And we can apply damage to them as well. Although we can't see their damage and their health values just yet, they are taking damage. And when they attack us, we can see the damage they're dealing out to us in the corner here. Let me make this full screen so you can see. Okay. And there's a damage taken away from Greystone. Okay, and you see the health just keep dropping. Okay, and that's it. So now we've got stats working in the game as well as damage being done by physical attacks. And there we have it. We now have stats affecting our damage being dealt and received by our actors. In the next episode, we're going to start work on our magic system by developing the magic menu itself. So join us on that next episode right now over on patreon.com/Ryan Laley. We can catch all of my episodes early before everyone else. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.